So, okay, a couple things about the VIP thing that we're doing.
Sure. Okay.
One, there's a good chance we'll be joined by a special guest.
Okay.
Um, and then the other thing, I don't know how old you are. I'm 58, but in the 1950s, Groucho Marx, I'm a huge Marx Brothers fan. Groucho Marx had a television show called You Bet Your Life.
Hmm.
And on this, are you familiar with it?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. So you know that he would have contestants on and they would say, if they happened to say an everyday word while they were talking to him, his duck would drop down from the ceiling with the word attached. And I can't remember if they won money or what it was they won, but they won something extra. So I
Okay.
have written an everyday word here.
Okay.
It's not in the Beach Boys lexicon, so you know you're not going to get by guessing song titles or anything. That would be too
Right.
easy. And if you say it during the
Okay.
Zoom, you'll get like a historic, one of a kind item. And
Okay. Sounds
I'll
good.
I haven't shown everybody this, but it's been on a couple of the VIP Zooms. So this is just to give you an idea. This is Paul von
Sure.
Herman's microphone autographed by him.
Awesome.
This is the microphone. I'm sorry, microphone harmonica
Harmonica.
that he
Yeah.
played on Plenty of Nothing on the Reimagined Gershwin album.
Oh wow.
This, and then he took it on the tour. This harmonica. So one of
So
a kind.
start saying a bunch of random words, huh?
Yeah. I had, I had a guy last night joke that he was just going to start. No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. Must have been Monday. A subscriber. He just said, "Oh, I'm just going to start guessing. Oh, I'm just going to start reading a dictionary until I get to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
word."
Yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
no one has said it yet, and
Okay.
it's a very everyday word. And I hope I think to show it to you at the when we're done. But you can just. I'm not leaving it in the actual videos that I'm posting online because I don't want anybody to cheat and watch the video and then become
Sure.
a member and then say, oh, I know what
Uh-huh.
the word is.
Uh-huh. Of course.
Then I'd have to change it.
Well, that's cool. I like the idea.
So thanks. So I was curious. A lot of the subscribers, you've been for a subscriber for a few years now,
Uh-huh.
and you've got somewhat of a collection. I love all the stuff that you responded. You know, your answers to the questions I sent out. They were standard questions, but it was just a great way for me to get to know all the different
Yeah.
VIP members, so that when I got
Right.
on with them, I could have some sort of sense of
Hmm.
their history of with the Beach Boys and what they love
Yeah.
about them. So I've been asking everyone what they liked about this issue, and then the PDF that I sent to your care,
Hmm.
about because they're all within the same timeline and what you enjoyed about it and what you picked up that you didn't know before, that type of thing.
Oh, I mean, that's every journal I get. It's something new and something exciting. And I think the cool thing about it is just the insight that you guys have to that world that none of us ever get to see. I think I could, I've got them sitting over there in the stack over there, right next to my bed. So I always read them like right before I go to bed because it's great. It's instead of being on the phone, I always just pick up my Beach Boy mat. I've got, let's see, I've got I Am Brian Wilson over there, Catch a Wave. I've got all sorts of fun stuff over there, books and all that, all the good stuff. So my wife is like, I know you always talk about, getting books in the library, but you always just end up getting, these ridiculous, obscure Beach Boys books that, what are you going to do with this? So I talked to my dad about it. That's he and I go back and forth all the time. So no, I
Oh,
just
okay.
really, I just love the fact that you have the insight and and the fact that you still have the desire to do it. I think that's unique because, as you see a lot of these boards that get, the population ages as we go along. So I'm always curious, what's the next generation? Who's going to be the people who carry this stuff on? Because I think it's important to make sure that it doesn't fade away. That it doesn't, once our passion for this goes, who is the next generation to take this stuff on? So I think that's always really important too. So I think by making this easily accessible and relevant to modern day, I think that's what's exciting about it. It's relevant to everyday lives. It's not looking back on the '60s and how great it was then and da 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 da. It's impactful for today. I think the articles are great. They're well written. They really connect you to the subject or whatever that may be, whether it's about Carl or Odd or his mom or whoever it is they're talking about. It's all stuff that resonates with everybody. So I think that's why it's so successful and I love reading it. It's every time I get it, it's like a little like a 6-year-old running inside with something something you get in the mail and ripping it apart and reading it from cover to cover. So that's again, we're all passionate about it. So I think that's the exciting thing about it.
Mhm.
And it just it brings you back to those formative years when you started listening to it, and it all is a it's a great nostalgia kick, but at the same time, I love the insight, I love the abilities for you guys to get interviews with those people. It's fascinating. So
Well, thank you. Yeah, several of the VIP members are around. How old are you?
I'm 43.
Okay, so then you're old enough to know what it was like to, and depending on where you lived, there may even be old used record stores near you. I don't
Hmm.
know, but there was growing up with the Beach Boys, even if it was 5 years between albums or whatever,
Right.
just the excitement that accompanied, oh, a new album's coming out, getting in the car or riding my bike or
Right.
whatever it was in real time and going to the store and
Hmm.
getting those albums. And so that's why so many people have asked through the years, why isn't ESQ electronic? Why isn't it?
Right.
It's just part of that is we haven't quite figured out a way to make it so people don't share it.
Sure. Sure.
In terms of mass,
Uh-huh.
I can't, I did it with the PDF for the VIP members, but we're only talking close to 30. It's a whole different thing.
Hmm.
I couldn't possibly go through 1,000 issues,
Yeah.
changing everybody. That would just be, I don't, that'd be hard.
Yeah.
Um, so it was nice to be able to find a way to create this additional kind of, it's almost a third edition. Um,
Hmm.
Not quite that full, but it was nice to be able to have the like. So I guess kind of a bookend to the whole thing because it's.
Right.
I wish I had had the content that was in this one first.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just didn't have it all at the time because
Yeah.
I would have put this one in the summer, this content in the summer issue, and then I would have put Steve Levine's interview
Right.
in the
Uh-huh.
fall because it's better to read this one first and then read this one.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, and the PDF file actually you could read that first even or after the fall edition, read the
Hmm.
PDF and then read the they all just tie together.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
interesting.
I
Um,
would say I really love getting something like you said, because my life is PDFs, and everything is online. I spend more time. I would say I probably spend another 20, 30 minutes inside the magazine versus the PDF, just because PDFs are fine and it's great, and I loved having access and being able to have that early access to go through it. But when I get it, it's I am waiting for it. I know it's coming, and I'm going to spend time, spending time in it. I'm the same way. I love having books. I don't do a lot of online reading or Kindle, or whatever it may be. I
yeah,
I much prefer having books,
yeah, me
and
too. You can
yeah, and there's just
see.
something about it, having it a tactile something in your hands versus, just again looking at a screen. So that's just purely preference at this point. But I've always been that way about books. So um, yeah, I appreciate the PDF, but every day for me is PDF, and I'm sure most of us are like that. So having something that shows up and is physical is really a nice touch.
Oh, thanks. It's hard for me to not want that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you, I grew up on book and records. Um,
hmm,
the comic books with the 45 was inserted into the back of the book, and you put
right,
the 45 on, and it would play, and it would ding when you had to turn the page, and then it would end, and you
huh,
turn the 45 over, and you'd finish the
right,
story. So I
hmm,
kind of, in a lot of ways, look at making ESQ that same way. The idea being you'll put the album on while
right,
you're reading about the album, if it's like
hmm,
something that's centered around a time period or a record
sure,
release.
uh-huh.
So that's a thing. I love that you have, if I'm reading this, that you have the Dennis Wilson radio station signed LP.
I do.
And who's it signed to?
I think it's signed to Mike. I think that's what his name is. Let's see
I,
here.
I
I can pull it
actually
up.
I actually came across one of those that's actually signed to David or Dave.
Really, I would
Yeah,
love to
I
have found.
could
I would
not
have loved.
believe it. I could not believe my luck. Yep, yep.
So yeah, so it's to Mike. This is my first solo album, as I'm sure you've seen.
Yep. And mine
Yeah.
says Dear Dave, or I don't think it's David. I think it's Dave, but I could not believe my luck
Uh
that
huh.
I
That's
got an
awesome.
album that had my name on it.
Uh huh.
I just thought, what are the chances of that? So I thought that's a pretty cool. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
keep that. I should frame it and put it on the wall. I guess, but it's so plain looking. What's the?
Yeah,
You didn't
yeah, it
really
is
write
kind of,
it to
but
me.
yeah, it's just kind of like something that's just like, okay, that's nice. Somebody wrote some little thing on there, but not knowing the importance of it and how great it is. Yeah,
Mm.
it's I keep it stored in a drawer down here, just kind of out of sight, out of the sun, out of everything, out of my 9 and 7 year old's hands. So it's just good to hide stuff.
I can understand. So
Yeah.
I'll show you a couple things from the '85 album. I don't know how much of a collector you really are in terms of. I've met several. I've met two really intense collectors in doing the
Uh-huh.
VIPs, where like
Right.
it's a complete
Room.
serious man cave, like where the guy was just covered side by side with just
Uh-huh.
everything, not
Uh-huh.
just Beach Boys, but Beatles and stuff like that.
Sure, sure.
But since the latest issues of ESQ have been about the '85 time period, I was
Yeah.
going to show you. I didn't know. So this I've shown a few people. So this is the promotional poster, one of the promotional posters that.
Oh wow. Oh, look at that picture. That's great.
So I had it framed, and I honestly don't remember where I got it too long ago. And then this bumper sticker.
I'll get you back. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that, and I wish I'm willing to bet that I got the bumper sticker through Lee Dempsey, but I don't remember what year or anything else. Do you have the coloring book? Did you get that?
I have not yet. I know Giggins. I talked to him for a while, and I've talked
Okay.
to him for a few years now. So I was going to ask if he could just send me one, but yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
I think
I'll happily invest in it.
considering the children and their
Yeah.
ages, it'd make a great Christmas gift.
Well, I when Sloop John when Al's what was it Sloop John B's book came out, um, he was out here. You know the one he wrote. He wrote it's a children's book. Um, and
Oh, Al
he
Jardine.
Al Jardine, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was out in Scottsdale because his son lives out. They live in northern Arizona, and he
Yeah.
was at the the MIM. It's a great a lot of concerts and stuff they have at the MIM. He was out here a few years ago, and he was signing the book, so I was able to get him to sign the book for my boys. So that was their first piece of Beach Boy memorabilia, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is very cool.
But yeah,
Um,
I collect a little bit. You know, it's like I think I listed on there. I've got like a world tour Beach Boys shirt that Dennis autographed, and then I had when I went and saw Brian, I had him autograph that. So it's Dennis, Brian, Al, Blondie, and I'm trying to get Mike Love to sign it because then you'd almost have the whole band on a T-shirt. So it's just a little challenging to get to Mike Love because he doesn't do a lot of signings, at least unless you go to the concert or something like that. So I think that would be the last thing. I've also been trying to get some Carl stuff too, you know, just because he was such a great dude, and I think the more I read about Carl, the more I appreciate Carl and what he did for the band. So those are some of the things I've been starting to collect too.
oh yeah, Carl's. That's another thing. Carl has come up in so many of the Zooms I've been doing, just like
Hmm.
uh, for different reasons, but we just end up talking about him. It's just for whether it's we're talking about his music or the influence that he had
Right.
on the group. That photo up there
Uh-huh.
is Carl in Raleigh, North Carolina, June of
Okay.
'97. So it was when he was wearing a
Yeah.
wig.
Yeah.
Um,
Real soon. Yep.
but it's the last time I saw him, and
Wow.
we had a photographer at the concert, so it's something that
Oh wow.
I framed. And then if you look across, then that's a shadow box. I'll get that down and show you. It's got like the background is I think the same picture or a similar picture
Oh
um,
wow.
from the '97
Uh-huh.
concert. That's the background, and then there's his
Sure.
guitar pick.
Awesome.
Him from Fanfare in
Hmm.
'96 when they played Columbia, South Carolina. Not
Hmm.
Fanfare, but Farm Aid. Farm Aid.
Oh, Farm Aid. Yeah. Yeah.
And then this little picture down here is Carl and Bruce photo. I was actually in this. I have the original photo, so it was me and
Uh-huh.
Carl with Bruce walking between us,
Oh,
photobombing
very
us.
cool.
But I
Awesome.
just cut me out because it's just another time where I had met
Uh-huh.
Carl and been around him. And then
Awesome.
a Carl
Wow.
Bounton by Margaret Doddlehead
Uh-huh.
from the Beach Boys fan club.
Oh, very cool.
Uh, that's the
Too
just
much cool stuff.
There's not a day. I think it's just accurate to say there's not a day go by that I just don't think about him.
Well, I think it's, I don't want to say, out of sight, out of mind, but, he was the quiet one. He was, I mean, not to say that Al was like, anything crazy, but he was the normal one, right? Or at least it seemed like he was more normal than the others, I
Normal
guess
by
you would say, right?
comparison.
Yeah, relative.
Yes.
It's all relative, right? But, later on in life, I think everyone can, I don't know, just a more normalizing brother potentially, or the one who, kind of was just not so outlandish and crazy and all the fun things. But yeah, maybe I think more people relate to him potentially because he is just sort of middle of the road and he was the one keeping it together a little bit. And, you had Brian, you had Dennis, and you had, Al and Mike. But, I think, and who doesn't love the fact that he sang God Only Knows? I think that's, you know, that just separates you and puts you in the echelon of, higher beings at this point.
So what do you remember? Now you said your favorite song was God Only Knows, but do you remember the first time that you heard, a Beach Boys recording where you knew it was the Beach Boys and that it stayed with you?
It was yeah, it was not only it was not Golden Note, it was I Can Hear Music. And we're again it's Sunflower. Sunflower is the one that resonates with me the most. I think again because it's growing up with my dad driving around in his car, we would go do things together and he would always put on Beach Boys and it was typically Sunflower because that was I remember it was on a I think it was on a tape and but it was just those sounds to me were so striking and so very Beach Boys to me in my mind. It was just something that stood out to me, and um, those that record to me is the I mean is the epitome of Beach Boys in my mind. Again, that's just because of I think how it was introduced to me, and it
Hmm.
was that time of connection with my dad and myself, and that was always something that we would talk about. When stuff was challenging growing up as a teenager, and 20 something, we could always talk about the Beach Boys, and I remember he found his old 8 track that he had of Sunflower, so. We couldn't talk about anything. We could talk about the Beach Boys, and it was typically around that album of how great that album was. So there's a lot of that emotion that's built around that album because of that. Not to say that the other albums aren't great, and I love them for their own respective reasons, but I think that album is really resonates with me just because of what it means to me personally. So
Now, have you? I know you're both boys, right? You
yeah.
have your children. Have you have
Mhm.
you have you kind of slowly tried to introduce Beach Boys music to them? Maybe Sounds of Summer or something like that?
Oh, we're deep into all of it. So typically when the music kicks on in the car, like, oh, Dad, God, not again. This is God Only Knows, or this is I Can Hear Music, or this is whatever it may be. And but that's how it was with me and my dad. And I think now it's almost to the point where it's so saturated in their brains that they don't say anything about it anymore. Now it's just like, okay, we're listening to today we're listening to Smile, or today we're listening to whatever it may be,
Hmm.
and but they absolutely know it. They know the sounds of it. They're always asking me, who was the one who drowned Dad? Who was the one who had whatever? Like they're very interested in it. They I've explained what happened and the history of the Beach Boys, and my wife is the same way now. She's been the recipient of many long bloviating conversations about Beach Boys and the history and all that fun stuff. So
Hmm.
they're very aware of all of that stuff. So they love the music. I think I'm sure right now it's probably not in their wheelhouse because they're again 9 and 7, but they'll learn to appreciate it someday.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh, it's supposed to be Carly Mignot,
Oh, very cool.
but he is. I know he's on the East Coast where I am.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing a book tour.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I
So,
saw the image.
so I'm wondering if maybe he just got if he's in the
Life
middle of
happens,
a
right?
book tour. Yeah, they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
took him away. But
That's okay.
all right.
If you want to call up Bruce Johnson, that's cool.
Depends on what mood he is in right now. That's the trick.
Uh-huh.
Another on tour. Oh, I've had the other day. I even had John Bolton on.
Oh,
Um,
really?
the new drummer. He's great, man. His energy
Ah,
is just off the charts. Yeah, he was a lot of fun to have on. Yeah, I've had Wendy Wilson, John. We had John
wow.
Bolton,
Uh-huh.
Gary Griffin. Paul
Hmm.
Mertens.
Wow.
So yeah, trying to, again, make the VIP thing,
Yeah, that's
because
very cool.
when I reached out to people, I said something in my email, like, the bullets that are up on the website in terms of what
Uh-huh.
comes with the VIP membership. And I said, so one of the things is, 30 minute, a Zoom with me.
Hmm.
Like, that's exciting. I don't consider that exciting. So I want to make it more interesting than me. So how do I do that? And I thought, well, let me see if I can get special guests to come on.
Heck
So,
yeah.
but
No, I think it's great just being able to chat because how often do you get to chat about the Beach Boys and just shoot the shit about things like this? You don't. And it's just great to be able to bounce off other people who have the same passion.
that's so true. That's a great point. Yeah, people may ask me, once they understand what I do, they may kind of peripherally be interested, they could be my age or older or whatever.
Right.
And
Hmm.
and typically older people will be a little bit more interested, like first generation
Right.
Beach
Sure. Sure.
Boys. But they're still not on the level. Like, if they start to talk about something, my brain immediately starts thinking about 5 to 10 other additional subjects of the
Right.
topic that we're on. And yeah, I had to learn many years ago to be able to just shut it off and
Hmm.
kind of just get out of my own way, because I like to talk about Jan and Dean just as much as I like to talk.
Right.
So, well, not quite, but there was a time when I just couldn't stop talking about Jan and Dean. And then
Okay.
that transferred into me not being able to stop talking about Smile. I
Hmm.
drove people nuts. My friends who it didn't matter. All I could do is talk
Sure.
about Smile.
Yeah.
Because I listened to that way late 80s. So that's how Lee Dempsey and I met, was actually at a record.
Okay.
And I was impatiently waiting behind him because, they had the records in a bin, and he was going
Hmm.
through the records, and I had just started my collection. I don't think I was still in high school, but I was in my early 20s, and I
Hmm.
just was like trying to kind of get him out of the way.
Right. Hmm.
But he finally finished, and he turned around and we started talking, and we became fast friends. And like a week later or something, or 3 weeks later, a short period of time, we saw one another at another record convention.
Huh.
I guess we both knew about the one that was coming up, and he asked me, "Hey, will you be at that one?" And I must have told him I was, because
Hmm.
he met me, and then he says, "Come on out to the car. I want to play something for you." And because when we first met, I just was talking to ad nauseum about Smile and the Smile music.
Right.
I had just discovered it through Malcolm Leo's, I pointed out to Malcolm in the interview, that I discovered Smile through his an American Band documentary. That
Hmm.
that period even existed, and by that time I had the Warner Brothers. Do you happen to have the Warner Brothers 2 LPs that are in a beige jacket? They're like Wild Honey with 2020 and Smiley Smile with Friends. Um,
I do not have the LP now.
they came out in '74, so that was my exposure to those 4 albums.
Okay.
Was in these nondescript
Huh.
jackets as twofers,
Hmm.
and released by Warner Brothers. And I listened to Smile. I can remember to this day listening to Smile Smile, and just thinking, what is this? Kind of joyfully,
Right.
just being kind of really perplexed, that and trying to understand when that came out. And of course, we didn't have Google. We didn't have anything
Right.
to just immediately resource at our fingertips. So it
Hmm.
took lots of studying, getting these books
Huh.
back here, and reading about them. And then the American Band video had come out, and I loved the way that Malcolm did 2 things that made me a bigger fan of the Beach Boys music. The first thing he did that I didn't talk to him about in the interview, but I've since spoken to him about, was what he did with Pet Sounds. any documentary I've seen or special about the Beach Boys that talks about Pet Sounds or Brian
Mhm.
Wilson, like the A&E special about Brian's life,
Mhm.
it's maybe Caroline No, uh, typically Wouldn't It Be Nice and God Only Knows,
Mhm.
probably Sloop John B. Those are the songs that get
Sure.
mentioned and covered.
Mhm.
But here we are in '85, and an American band has Bruce Johnston walking up the steps at the Balboa Club, and he knows the album Pet Sounds, and bang, it goes right into Here Today. It's the only documentary that does that. It's the only
Uh-huh.
documentary that uses that song. And
Interesting.
like that, because it's bum, bum, bum. And you immediately just feel like, I was just sucked right in.
Right.
And, and it, and then it just picks up, and then they have the live footage of the guys, I think from
Uh-huh.
the Hawaii shows that they had done.
Oh yeah.
And so they have that footage, music, and then they
Uh-huh.
cleverly took the Good Vibrations promotional footage video from them at the firehouse going down the fire poles, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
inserted that with the fire music,
Oh
and I
wow.
didn't know any better.
Sure.
I just thought, oh, that must be what that is, and what is
Uh-huh.
this? Because I'd
Right.
heard Smiley Smile, but I'm like, what is this?
Mhm.
What? They're at a firehouse, and
What's going on?
Brian's in bed smoking a cigarette, which was another little subtlety that Malcolm purposely did because it
Wow.
was fire. The cigarette was on
Sure,
fire.
sure, sure.
So
Uh-huh.
that went over my head. But
Uh-huh.
Brian, they shoot to Brian doing the sessions for Fire, and his eyes are
Mhm.
rolling because he's on a certain substance, and
Mhm.
he's talking about buckets of smoldering wood, and I'm just going, what is going on? And then I found out what was going on, and I could not get enough of this unreleased album.
Sure.
I couldn't get enough of it. And so, I had 2020, like I said, and I had
Right.
Wild Honey and Friends, and
Friends, yeah.
2020 had Our Prayer and Cabanescence,
Mhm.
and Wild Honey had Mama Says, was the Sleep a Lot, Eat a
Yeah.
Lot, or something like that.
Mhm.
So I heard all these little snippets of Smile things, and I could hear, like even Diamond Head from Friends, I thought sounded like a Smile remnant. Like it might have started during that period and then got finished. Uh,
Right.
and I could just hear things that were meant to be together. Like I could hear Vegetables went with Mama Says. I could hear certain, like Our Prayer was obviously connected to the Smile music.
Mhm.
And that's before I had books, before I had things to be able to understand. And then I started buying bootlegs like a madman. I'd go to record
Yeah.
conventions just to find the Smile bootlegs. And man, that absorbed 2 years of my life where I just
I
went home and I would put the records on and then
oh yeah.
sequence the album the way that I wanted it to be sequenced. And that ended up being easily 8 to 10 different versions. You
Wow.
know, as I
Uh-huh.
discovered more music, as I got more bootlegs, as I
Sure.
took pieces of things. But I just think, Essence is my favorite song by the
Yeah.
Beach
Oh
Boys.
yeah. Yeah,
So
it's interesting. Interesting you say that because I've done the same thing where my wife will say, "Oh, you're in your Beach Boys stage again," where all of a sudden it's only Beach Boys. And like the other morning, we were getting ready, and I was listening to the whole California Saga, where all of those, and she's like, "What in the hell are we listening to?" And she's been exposed to a lot of Beach Boys, but and the Eagles Wing, and as Al's going through and talking through this thing, and it's just, and she's like, okay, this is. I'm gonna go get ready in the other bathroom because you are obviously having a moment here where you need to be on your own. And then on my way to sunny California, and all of a sudden it kicks in. I'm like, wait, you gotta wait for the song. It's not just talking. You gotta wait. And then when Jack Riley comes in and starts doing his thing, and he's talking about the oh, what was it? I'm in a brain fart here. The Where he's talking and the kids are the radio, the what is the
oh,
radio,
radio, transistor, magic transistor.
transistor radio. Yeah, magic transistor radio. And then she walks in again and she's like, this, I don't know what you're listening to, but this you have fun because you're in your Beach Boys moment, and I get it. So I'm just gonna let you finish. But it's I go through the same stages where all of a sudden it's whatever album it is today, whether it's Surf and Safari, well she's starting off, or or you're getting into some of the weird later '80s stuff. There's a I can't remember on one kind of pull it up here. One of the songs that I really like from the later '80s, but she's just like, why are you doing this? Like, what? She doesn't get it. She sort of gets it, because she's been around a long time now. But she's like, I just don't get it anymore. So yeah, yeah, I'll have to look it up, but it's good stuff. I can't complain, and I'm happy that the other people out there who share my sickness and passion.
Well, you know, Carl didn't actually said, I can't remember his music is a people connector, I think was what he
Oh
was
yeah,
saying in the
hmm
documentary that they had done.
right.
And I've always looked at what, Carl is kind of, and it's true with all of them, regardless of what you're listening to. But the music,
hmm
and this is not just true with the Beach Boys, I think this is true with other groups, and I can't, it's hard for me to imagine what I'm going to say to be true and applicable to certain types of music, but
hmm
maybe it is in certain ways. But I think for the Beach Boys, certainly, uh, it's almost like a ministry. There's a lot of
It's going to
component,
church. It's
yeah,
like going to church.
it's a lot of healing factors.
Oh yeah. hmm Yep.
So,
Yeah. It's
uh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, no, I was just curious if you now do you go to church? Are you a church goer? Do you make that connection?
Um, yeah, and I grew up going to church with my family, and I think that's something that is still part of our lives. I mean, we go to church not as much as probably we used to, but I would say from the way it sounds kind of corny, right? But the way you sound after, or the way you feel after coming out of, really immersing yourself in an album that connects to you, I think is a similar sensation and a feel as you feel coming out of church that's been a really passionate like church service where you really got something out of it. And I think I think that's maybe more to the point of every time I listen to like, again, I think it depends on the mood, right? Sometimes you're going to church and you're in a better mood, so you're getting more from the pastor, and you're getting, and some days you go in and it's just, it's just like, I'm just here because I'm here this morning and I'm not feeling it. But the moments you listen to those Beach Boy albums and all of a sudden your brain is locked in, you want to be there. Their music to me resonates and hits me deeper than I think any other music that I've ever listened to growing up. And I think because you listen to Beach Boys, you listen to Phil Spector, and you hear all these other things, and you listen to the Ronettes, and you hear, those are very passionate, deep, sounds
Hmm.
as well. But again, for me, it's always been the harmony that the Beach Boys have been able to do. And then you start getting into the Four Freshmen, and you hear that, and you're like, oh wow, I understand where Brian got it from, and I understand what he was trying to emulate, and then took to the next level. And but you start getting into all these things, and I think that's where the fun starts is the ability to dive into other music and to really start appreciating what the Beach Boys were able to do and take and make their own, and make it so special and so unique that the fact that we're sitting here in 2024 almost talking about what these guys did 60 years ago. So I don't know many other bands, outside of a handful of other bands who people
That's
can
right.
continue to do that with.
Yeah, there's a few, but not there. There's certainly not many. Not even, not
No.
even that you can count on one hand. I mean, that's
Well, and especially when it felt like they were getting written off for so long too, right? It was for so long, it was like, oh, they're just surf music. It's just crap. They were done. Jimi Hendrix even wrote them off at one point saying, they're over, that was a fun experiment, but now we're moving on to the real, artsy, more intelligent music. And then
yeah.
like, it's just amazing how the world has kind of come around to really appreciate and value what it is that they produced and how ahead of their time it was. And I think that's something that's often overlooked on even today. You hear, most kids know about the Beach Boys, but they don't put them in the same vein as the Beatles because apparently the Beatles were more, and I don't agree with this, and I think most people who are into the Beach Boys don't agree with it, but they were so more artistic and forward pushing, but not realizing what Brian was doing and not realizing that he was sort of setting that stage for them to emulate and go back and forth in terms of all the creativity he was doing and the things he was doing that were the Beatles were going, oh shit, we're going to do that too, and we're going to take that. But I don't, for whatever reason, Brian doesn't get that respect, and the band doesn't get that respect.
He does. He and they do in the music world with
Right,
peers.
right, right.
In terms of what you like in music is such a subjective thing. I mean, like you
Sure.
have a connection to Sunflower because of your experiences with your father.
Right.
Um, and I have no doubt that your kids will, as they get older, will have certain albums that'll kind of like where
Hmm.
they'll really sink in at some point, and they too will kind of
Yeah.
hopefully carry something from my son is locked in on the sounds of summer. He just likes hearing the
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'll play other albums, but he enjoys hearing. He really likes Mike's 12 Sides of Summer,
Yeah.
because he just likes to sing along. He just enjoys
Sure.
singing along.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, uh, the beat. I'm not one to. I'm always a thinker of what do I like about something. That's one
Hmm.
way that I think, and I don't
Right.
think comparatively. Although if somebody's saying, if I'm having a conversations about two different albums or two different groups, there you just in talking you'll end up saying, oh, I like this, or I like
Hmm.
this or that person, or whatever. But
Hmm.
David Marks and I many years ago were having a phone not a phone conversation. We're just sitting together talking about the Beatles, talking about Lennon and McCartney, and he likes John Lennon more, and I like Paul McCartney more.
Hmm.
Um, and then he said something to me like, well, who do you think's better? And I said, I think they made each other better, and then each on their own make significant and poignant music on their own. That again, just like the Beatles catalog is with us to
Right.
this day. Paul McCartney never wrote Imagine. And to that same degree, John Lennon never wrote Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
So what I would imagine, what would those songs have been like had they still been the Beatles? Would have been interesting because the way
Right.
they influenced each other. You go all the way back to "It's Getting Better All the Time" from
Hmm.
Sergeant Pepper's, where Paul was working on that, and and I think I can't quite remember the line, but um, Lennon came in with a line, and Paul was like, "Oh my God, I never would have had that." And then on "Hey Jude," Paul had the line, "The movement you need is on your shoulder." And he said, "Don't worry about that line. I'm going to fix it later. It's just what I got right
Hmm.
now." And Lennon looked at him and said, "No, man, that's it."
Hmm.
So it was just where they made each other better,
Right.
and and where the other one would not have come up with the idea, or you know, Paul. So it's really similar to Mike and Brian.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh, Van Dyke
Steel
Park's a
Sergeant. Yeah.
brilliant lyricist,
Hmm.
again, Evanescence is my favorite song. Mike had
Hmm.
nothing to do with that, but Mike had the optimistic viewpoint of things.
Hmm.
Although he had, at that time in his life, he'd already been divorced. He had every reason to not be. He could have been
Sure.
melancholy
Yeah.
too,
Right.
but he wasn't. And he looked at
Hmm.
things, and this way before yeah, they had a couple of hits, but this is way before they achieved the stellar success of. This is just a few albums in where he
Hmm.
and Brian were just clicking, and it was Brian could hit the chords, and I think "I Get Around's a great example of that, where Mike just borrowed the idea of Barbara Ann, and Brian had "I Get Around," and he had really the meat and potatoes of the song, but he didn't.
Hmm.
He started it with I think just the verse, where there wasn't a whole lot of introduction to it, and Mike said, "Well, listen, let's start it like Barbara Ann. We'll do round, round, get around, I get around, instead of blah, 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 around. We'll start it the same way just to get into it, and then we'll talk about cruising around." So
Yeah.
that, again, it's just like the Lennon and McCartney thing. One guy having the idea to help the other guy.
Sure. Hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't, that's my takeaway with anything that I enjoy and that I listen to is how did it happen? What created the magic that of
Uh-huh.
this particular recording that I love to this day, that just is so, even if it's not in quote meaningful,
Right.
if it's not
Hmm.
as meaningful as Cabanescence is to me, like a
Hmm.
fun, 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 or an I Get Around,
Right.
those songs are still great. I mean, you go to
Hmm.
I
I
I,
look at
I
like
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think about like when I think about like Hawaii, songs like that that are just there's so much
Right.
punch to that song and so much like joy and it's alive when you hear that. It may not be, up there in the top 20 of their hits or whatever, but it's such a fun song to listen to and all the stuff that comes together to layer that the sounds in and how when I hear that song, I just want to crank it. Like that's a song that I like to drive to. And how many Beach Boys songs do you drive to, right? Like one makes you go fast. Like some of those songs just hit me. And again, I don't know what it is about it, but it's just like it's the beat, the harmony, they just absolutely nailed it. And again, that's not one person doing that. That's a whole group of people coming together to make that work.
That's right. And I was going to tell you, in regard to church, I because I love music so much, I just joined the church choir.
Okay.
So I've been on the church choir since '06 or '07. So
Okay.
so yeah, and
Yeah.
it's and so that's something to consider.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. Yeah,
That's
I'm Lutheran, so we're the church that sings, right? So that's always been everything is stand up and sing from the hymnal. So we're very much singers when it comes to from the church aspect of it. Not a lot of talking, more singing. So
okay. Okay.
yeah.
Um, what was going to ask you? So when's the last time? I always liken Brian's shows to art
Hmm.
exhibits and Mike and
Hmm.
Bruce's shows to just like going out for family entertainment, family night,
Right, right.
kind of like a family night that
Uh-huh.
you would just as much as you'd go to a movie or go to a fair or you'd go out as a family to do something fun.
Hmm.
That's what I like in Mike and Bruce's show. But they're doing the music, so they're representing
Oh
Brian
yeah.
just as
Oh yeah.
much as Brian, anybody else is. I
Hmm.
don't think of them as a tribute band, although I understand when people say that.
Right.
I understand that, but I don't think of them that way. I had a really interesting experience that I'll share with you. I've told this story a few times. This had to be November of 2015, I think it was, and I was sitting in the catering area um, with and Al was there, and I was talking to Al because it was coming up on the 50th of the Pet
Right.
Sounds, and
Hmm.
Brian was there, and I felt Mike. I felt Mike from Brian. Brian wasn't saying a word.
Right.
He wasn't
Uh-huh.
saying a word, and I
Uh-huh.
felt Mike. Now, the next year, I was at a Beach Boys show. I went to see because I did the 2016 tour program with Dean Torrance and then the hardcover coffee
Hmm.
table book here. I'd gone up to Washington D.C. because they were playing the what's the I'm drawing a blank the Kennedy Center.
Yeah, the center.
Yeah, so that's where Mike and Bruce were playing, and it was interesting because I had that experience with Brian in 2015 that I was kind of wondering if I was going to feel that like feel Brian
Uh-huh.
or whatever around, and it was interesting because I did not feel Brian until Mike took the stage, and when
Hmm.
Mike took the stage, all I felt was Brian.
Huh.
And it was just really interesting to me that the kind of the paradox with Brian, he wasn't on stage yet. It was just sitting there, and I felt Mike. Whereas with Mike, I didn't feel Brian's spirit until Mike took the stage and
Interesting.
started kicking ass.
Yeah.
And that show they were doing Pet Sounds music, and so
Uh-huh.
they did Here Today. Then the typical other three,
Right.
um, Sloop, God, and Wouldn't It Be Nice? But it
Hmm.
was really interesting that that I had that experience. That it's interesting. Now I never met Dennis. Um, I think I would have liked to have met him, but I didn't become a fan until it was near the end for him. So
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, Daryl Dragon told me in an interview that I'd done with him that he had actually gone to a show towards the end in the early 80s and he
Hmm.
walked right past Dennis and he didn't even recognize him.
Yeah, just so overweight and just
I guess,
bloated.
yeah, yeah, I got, yeah. And Dennis got, said, "Hey, it's me." Yeah. Uh,
Hmm.
But so do you like? So you're 43. So do you what do you think about? Did you happen to have was the Full House experience with Stamos and the guys being on Full House back in the 90s? What was that like for you?
I thought it was goofy personally. My sister, my younger sister, she's 7 years younger, and she was really into that. I think I watched it, but I was right as it came on, I was kind of phasing out of that a little bit. But I watched it because she watched it.
Yeah.
And I saw them coming on there, and I saw, obviously Mike was leading the charge, and Brian was huddled in the background, obviously forced to be there. And I don't know if that was Landy days or what was going on with that, but
It, it was.
yeah. And it now that I look back on it, it's like, oh, there's obviously something going on there that nobody really discussed because you wouldn't even know. I mean, at least from my perspective, the Beach Boys at that point were Al because he always had the hat. They always looked like that. They always looked like the front men. It was Al and Mike and Bruce Johnson obviously was there, and then John Stamos. And so they were the three cool ones because they were young, hip, at least younger and hipper. And then you had the weird guy in the background, Brian and Carl, and Carl too. I remember Carl being there a little bit, but I always remember
Right.
because they always had the hats on and they're always wearing the Beach Boys hats and all that kind of stuff. So they looked younger maybe. But I remember them, because they would harmonize in the front, and Candace Cameron would be there, and they'd all be swooning. But it just seemed so. And then I'd go listen to the albums because you'd hear them on the show, and you do this, and then I'd go listen to it, and it just I realize they're doing it because they're doing it for whatever reason. They want to be on TV. They want to continue, try to remain relevant, or whatever it may be. But I just remember it just kind of being like, okay, that to me, if there ever was a tribute band, it was them. It was them trying to, inject themselves into the zeitgeist of the time and be like, hey, okay, well, this is what we're gonna do, and this is where we're gonna be, and we're trying to remain hip and cool, and that was Kokomo and all that fun stuff. So, I know there was all that push to do that, and thank God for that, right? I mean that threw the Beach Boys back into the mainstream big time. So again, you can thank Mike. You can thank a lot of people for doing what they did to keep this band around and relevant, and in our sites. So, but it was neither here nor there for me, honestly. It was just a thing, and I would turn it off and I'd go listen to my dad's 8 tracks, or I'd go listen to my my CDs and stuff like that. So, yeah,
Have you heard the version of Kokomo with Brian singing on it, the Spanish version?
I I don't think so.
Oh, I'll have to make a note of that.
I could only imagine. I remember him doing something. It was on like the Beaver show, the Beaver Cleaver show
Oh,
back in the day when they had
that
that was
that was
some of the
dreadful.
worst stuff. That was some of the worst stuff I've ever heard.
That see now to me, comparatively speaking,
Yeah,
after I just got done saying I don't do comparisons,
yeah,
Leave It to
that
Beaver
was
thing was so cheesy
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you couldn't even
And,
keep it on a cracker. I mean, that
yeah.
stuff just slid right.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, oh my
Oh yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. I
Wow.
remember. Who was? I don't. I'm sure you probably know. The woman on YouTube who posts all those very like random rare Beach Boy videos.
Laura. Hey, Laura.
Yeah, Alora, and I think she was the one who posted it, and I saw that, and she's like, "Oh, I found this video," and I remember going and watching it. It was it was tough to stomach. It was just, and it was understanding that it was going to be cheesy and understanding that it was going to be exactly what it was. But
Hmm.
then he's up there dancing and he's doing these things, and I'm like, who would have ever allowed this other than
You know
Landy
who?
to go out
That's
there, and
that's right.
it was just so stupid. But I think there's a lot of you. How many times can you look back in your own life and go, "Man, that was not a wise decision. I should have done
Well,
that."
that's right. We've all done.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, they're not on TV.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, I
Yeah.
have kind of and I think it did this in with one of the videos that I did with Giggins was I have the kind of a thing. If Carl wasn't involved, then that was all I needed to know. Type of
Hmm. Right.
baseline for whether or not I should put my energy and time into something. Because I
Hmm.
thought that, like with Summer in Paradise, an album which I enjoy, I didn't think that if Forever was going to be included, and I still feel this way, that it should have been the Beach Boys singing lead with maybe Stamos playing drums,
Hmm.
and or actually moved and called a bonus cut, right, as a bonus track, like Male Ego was on the '85 album,
Right. Hmm.
designated that way, and then not as Jesse and the Rippers, but as John
Yeah.
Stamos. And that
Hmm.
was the problem, because sure, on the television show it was Jesse and the Rippers. Of course, it's not gonna be John
Sure.
Stamos all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that Carl was involved in that, and Carl sings in the video, and he is
Hmm.
involved, he approved.
Yeah.
Carl did not do anything he didn't approve of or
Right.
agree with. So
Hmm.
he's not in the Wipeout video. So they stuck him on the beach ball.
Yeah.
Um, but there were things that Carl did not agree with. Now, Carl
Right.
loved what John Stamos was able to do for the group as it related to being able to bring in another generation
Hmm.
and to honor his brother's song. Carl had no problem with that. So
Right.
see, to me, that's kind of my gauge. So Carl
Hmm.
would not have been in the video. He would not have done it had he had a problem with the
Hmm.
idea or the presentation.
Right.
So for him to be in the video, for him to be singing his part, his original part from all those years ago, on a
Hmm.
song that frankly deserves, Dennis became such a monster talent as a songwriter
Right.
that for a song, and I don't care who does it, it would make no, well, if it's Weird Al Yankovic, maybe we're having a different conversation.
Sure.
But um, for John Stamos to love Sunflower as much as you and I do, and
Hmm.
for him to be able to kind of wield that, I'm on a television show, I'm a music guy on the television show.
Yeah.
Why don't you come as yourselves and we'll do this fun
Hmm.
thing? And I thought it went great when they did the Kokomo thing. I thought it was fun. The Beach Boys huddle. I've actually
Yeah.
watched
Yeah.
that happen in real life. I've
Uh-huh.
actually seen the Beach Boys huddle, but it was with Al Jardine's Family and Friends back in
Okay.
2000, and it was at the Beverly Hills Hilton backstage when they were playing an event for Big Brother Big Sister that was
Hmm.
hosted. Who was it hosted by? Oh gosh, I can see his face. I can't think of his name. He used to be on Entertainment Tonight. Had a mustache. Bill something.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
wasn't John Tesh. It was some other fellow.
Right.
Kelsey. I mean, oh my God. I was in
Hmm.
line looking at auction stuff next to Bo Bridges, Jackson Brown.
Very
I mean,
cool.
it was very, very cool, and had dinner, had this really lovely dinner out sitting around. Kelsey Grammer's over here, and
Hmm.
I was just kind of, I wasn't starstruck, but I was certainly like, like processing the fact that I was
Where
in
you
this
were, where you
room with
were.
all these people. Yeah, it was
Hmm.
incredible, and it was
Hmm.
earlier that day. I was just sitting in the Hilton cafeteria by myself, and all of a sudden the doors swing open, and it's Mel Brooks showing this lady uh, the different parts of the hotel. And the
Uh-huh.
funny thing was, he starts to close the doors, and he looks at me for a second, like, "Do I know that guy? Should I say hello?" And then he goes, "No, I don't know that guy." And he closes the door. But he stopped for a second to make sure, because he wanted
Uh-huh.
to, no.
Yeah,
But it
very
was
cool.
amazing. It
Uh-huh.
was very cool. So backstage, before they went on, they'd done their soundtrack, and then they were backstage. So this is with Carney and Wendy and Matt and
Oh yeah. Right. Uh-huh.
Randall Kirsch, Tom Jacob, Bobby Figueroa, Ed Carter, and they did
Mm-hmm.
the huddle, and they did a Good Vibrations thing, and I filmed it. It's like,
Oh, very cool.
and they just did
Uh-huh.
it in a circle. It was too cool. It was
Awesome.
just a neat thing to see. And so when I actually, my son loves Full House and Fuller House,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the first concert I took Ethan to um, was June of 2014, and Stamos was at that show in Augusta, Georgia.
Oh, cool. Huh.
So that was the first show he went to, and they just became fast friends. And John actually calls him. He'll either send him a video or do a Zoom
Oh,
with him
wow.
every year on his birthday. So
That's
I
awesome.
he's John is as far as The stuff, yeah, it's cheesy. Like when Mike did an episode of Full House for like, and they did Be True to Your School, and it was just Mike with
Yeah,
the Jesse and the
right.
Rippers. That was really cheesy. Um, and then they did the Forever thing, which was the first episode was so funny. I laugh at it to this day because they come in, they want Becky's fried chicken, and John's playing some Elvis or something on his guitar, and he says, I'd really like to do Forever. And Bruce goes, You want it? It's yours. And I just keep thinking to myself, if we're only that easy, it's never that easy. Oh my God, the idea that you could just say, I want it, and it's okay. But I think a lot, I think it's a great thing that, that somebody your kid's age or girls who are maybe Taylor Swift fans even
Right.
would, if they saw John Stamos, would walk up to him and say, I love that song Forever. I just
Hmm.
think it's so great. And they have no concept that it came from Dennis Wilson or the
Right.
Sunflower album. But
Hmm.
I still think it's a wonderful legacy that
Oh yeah.
Dennis' music lives on, that song has gotten so much esteem. I mean, because I'm sure if it had been left up to one of the alpha males in the group,
Mm,
after Dennis was gone,
sure.
had it been left up to Mike, I'm sure he would have said, well, let's do Good Vibrations, or let's do I Get Around, or let's do this or
Hmm.
that. So for John to have the kind of, you know, I think there's a lot of meaningful value behind having a Dennis Wilson song kind of carry on uh,
Hmm.
through these generations of
Yeah.
now 30 plus years of Full House fans. That
Yeah.
that you know that there's actually people who even get married to Forever, right?
Oh yeah.
They get married to Forever. It's not, and it's probably not the Beach Boys version. It's probably
Hmm.
somebody they pay for the house band to learn
Sure. Oh
Forever,
yeah.
and they watch the Full House to see what it is. So there, that
Uh-huh.
Stamos has told me that, where people are always like, "Oh my God, I fell in love Forever," and that was our wedding song. And just think about that. That
Yeah. Well, it's my wife's favorite song of
there
all
you
the songs. That's her favorite song. Yeah.
see, and that's powerful. I mean, and,
Hmm.
and and it's so powerful that it meant so much to John that he thought, well, how can I get to keep? And he didn't. I'm sure he didn't approach it thinking, how can I keep Dennis's legacy alive?
Right.
I love this song. Is there a way for me to incorporate it into the show? And the
Hmm.
beautiful thing about it is Dennis Wilson's legacy is very alive
Oh
without
yeah.
people even realizing it.
Hmm.
I love that. I love that about that.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah. I think it's unfortunate that it turned out the way it did for him. I think there was so much obviously still in the tank. I think for him in terms of what he had to offer, but lucky that we have that we still both have this album sitting here that you can put on the record player and listen to and just again appreciate what it is for what it is. And um, yeah, it's you said something earlier about the kind of the Carl measure, and I've heard this before, and I don't maybe know if it was in one of the journals, but what Carl would have thought of Brian's music moving forward, and had he would have bought into a lot of the stuff that he's done, and just I was just curious what your thoughts are, because then obviously they had their unique relationship with each other and how they about viewed each other and what they were willing to do, and what would your thoughts be on on how Carl would view? I know it's an impossible question to answer, but some of the choices maybe that Brian would have made with his newer music, or in the last 15 to 20 years or something like that Carl may not have been so interested in.
What if it's a great question, and you're right. It is hard to answer. I mean, it surprised me when I learned that Carl was not in support of all the stuff that Brian had done with Andy Paley.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
that he was very selective. Like he listened to it all and was like, I'll do this one and this one.
It may have been what is it's a book I read. I can't remember what it is. It's a French. It was written by maybe an English author, like a rare book. Shoot, I'd have
The
to look it
Paley
up.
sessions? Was it the Paley sessions or no? I don't
Shoot,
know
it's in
what
my other.
you're talking about right off the top of my head.
Let me look it up. I'll try to find it real quick if I can. But and it may have been that. It's basically talking about how when Brian was making his first album, his first, Imagine, or not imagination, not imagination. What's the first one?
His
Let's see
'88
here.
self-titled album.
Yeah, yeah, the self-title. And this is kind of like the documented the record, the recordings that this guy made of all the interviews of all the goings on that created this album, and obviously the Eugene Landy impact and all that kind of stuff. Shoot, where is it? But it was fascinating because it was basically this guy's recordings, and he turned this into a book. And it was, I think that's where they talked about the
Oh,
Carl
maybe
issue.
the Usher, maybe the Gary Usher thing. There was a book, like a soft cover book about the Gary Usher sessions.
I'm gonna find it real quick, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, it just Carl became, Carl twice. In the early '80s, he did not leave the group. He went and did worked on his first solo album while still as a member of the Beach Boys, and then he left after that to do the second album. But
Right.
his famous quote in the press release was, when the Beach Boys are as focused, or I don't know if the word was focused, but concerned about making good music as they were in '61 as they are in '81, then,
That's
you know.
right. Yep.
So Carl took it at that point. It was obvious to me that Carl took what he was doing as a musician very seriously. Um,
hmm
and then after they had the string of soundtrack recordings, which were give and take, I mean, I'll listen to Carl sing anything. So Problem Child, as much as it's a
Yeah.
throwaway track, I listen to it because it's
Yeah.
Carl.
Yeah.
Same with Crocodile Rock. Crocodile Rock to me is a fantastic recording by the boys. Um,
hmm
but he went off and he did Beckley, Lamb and Wilson. And Run Don't Walk was supposed to be a Beach Boys recording. So and then he even went so far as to write Like a Brother to Brian. It's unmistakably to Brian. Um,
hmm
and puts it out on this other album because it's almost the same. I liken that almost the same way that Brian had Glenn Campbell record "Guess I'm Dumb."
hmm
It couldn't go on a Beach Boys record, and you couldn't really put "Like a Brother" on a Beach Boys record if the other Beach Boys are focused on soundtrack recordings or whatever have you that they were doing at the time. And I don't think, and I know many people feel differently. Summer in Paradise to me has some really nice moments on it. Lahaina Aloha, in particular,
Yeah. Right.
Strange Things
hmm
Happen, Lahaina Aloha, and the UK version of Island Fever, because the UK version of Island Fever's got all the sound effects of the forest and the birds and whatnot in the beginning,
Right. Right.
and it actually fits the album artwork perfectly. And I don't know why it wasn't a single. Maybe they just didn't have enough money or momentum off the release of the album. But that
hmm
should have been a single because it
hmm
had the same intention that Kokomo did. But Laina Aloha is beautiful for me, and it's also painful for me, but in a good way, because I
hmm
hear Carl sing, I wanna, but I can't stay," and that was in '92. But now that he's gone, and I hear that voice sing those words. I, it's like he's not going to be around. You know,
hmm
so I hear those. I want it, but I can't stay. And
Well, and wasn't Lay Down Burden then the response back to like Brian singing about Carl, right? I think Lay Down Burden was about him talking about Carl, wasn't it?
well,
In a sense, right?
in a sense, absolutely, in a sense, that song was written before Carl passed and finished before Carl passed. And then I believe Carl was supposed to sing on two recordings because I was actually in Nashville at Masterphonic Studio with
Hmm.
Brian in February of '98. It was days before Carl
Okay.
passed. That's where I met Jerry Schilling for the first time.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize how serious Carl's condition was.
Right.
Because all we all knew was that he was fighting it, and everybody thought he was going to get through it.
hmm
Um, and then it didn't work out that way. But at the sessions, they were talking about two songs. I think one was "Lay Down Burden," and the other one might have been "Cry." I'm not sure, but Carl was to sing. He had agreed to sing, I think, on one or two songs,
Okay.
and I think so. When he passed, that song, "The Lay Down Burden," with the intention behind it and the lyrical references and everything, it just seemed to fit. So it
Okay.
became easy for Brian to kind of dedicate that to Carl.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, um,
Interesting.
but I'm sorry we didn't have a special guest today.
No,
I
that's all
do
right.
have to bounce because I got to go get ready for. I'm off to choir rehearsal tonight.
Oh, nice.
So, but I hope that you've enjoyed this, and we'll schedule another one down the road, and hopefully in the next one we'll have that the surprise special guest.
Absolutely. Hey,
And you-
well, hey, I really appreciate you setting the time up to do this, and it was, my honor and my pleasure to be able to talk to you, and I'd love to do it again if we ever have a chance.
I hope to as well. All right, Tom. Thank you.
Take care. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, you too.
Yeah. Bye.